Welcome to Evolve, Reinventing Leadership, Building Freedom Cultures, with thought leader and award-winning author Yvette Bethel. This podcast provides you with insights and ideas you can use to reinvent your culture through trust and the principles of interconnectivity, flow, and balance. At a time when the world is rewriting the rules of work, traditional leadership practices are not enough. It's time to perceive persistent challenges through a new lens. It's time to evolve. Hello, everyone, and welcome once again. This is your host, Yvette Bethel, and the topic for this episode of Evolve is the courage to leave, breaking free from toxic workplaces, with author, speaker, and podcast host extraordinaire, Jeff Davis, known as Mr. Mountaintop and dubbed the Muhammad Ali of mental health. Jeff has delivered transformational keynotes globally and interviewed billionaires, U.S. senators, Fortune 500 CEOs, and New York Times bestselling authors. He holds a master's from Johns Hopkins Carey Business School and has been featured on Forbes, TEDx, Medium, LeadX, and Tiny Buddha. Jeff is also no stranger to podcast audiences, as I said earlier. He was recently featured on the Limitless podcast hosted by an iconic influencer based in Singapore. Hello, Jeff, and welcome to Evolve.
Yvette, it's a pleasure to be here today, and I'm really looking forward to our discussion.
Oh, so am I. So am I. I love this topic. So to start off, could you share your story, the one that led you to write The Courage to Leave, Breaking Free from Toxic Workplaces?
Yes, so the core one is this. I defeated a corrupt multi-billion dollar company with my team of 7 lawyers.
Yeah.
And to set the table, so just to set a bit of context, that was overseas. That happened in the Netherlands. I'm from Connecticut, which is near New York. And very succinctly, I found and experienced these really toxic workplaces in Connecticut. I ended up working in Times Square in New York City. I had colleagues yelling at me. I came across all sorts of dysfunctions. And at the time, I thought, oh, it must be a Connecticut and New York kind of thing. And what inspired me to write the book is when I started to work in other places around the country and the world, aka I'm in the Netherlands, I face a corrupt company, I had other toxic work experiences in the Netherlands. I realized it's actually systemic and worldwide. And yeah, that's the core story that inspired me to write this book. I had gone on burnout. The company bullied and harassed me. In fact, they made demands and threats. They had been mistreating people for years. I stood up to them. I decided I was not going to tolerate the abuse, and I defeated them not only legally, but I ended up getting the corrupt HR director fired.
This is really interesting because, I've worked in different places, a lot in the Bahamas, where I'm from, but in different places around the world. And I always had the feeling that there weren't many non-toxic kinds of environments. I'm sure there are many, but I haven't really encountered them. Why do you think this is? What's going on behind that from your perspective?
Yes, I consult with companies. I've worked with many, as I mentioned, all around the world. So succinctly, it's the lack of leadership. If I had to say it in 3 words, lack of leadership. Obviously goes way deeper than that.
Yeah.
If we go to the root cause, and this is really deep, if you're to ask me, well, what's underneath that? It's a lot of unresolved trauma. Now, this is certainly not the only cause. There are lots of causes. It's a myriad of factors. But in my research and in interviewing dozens of people for the book who have also been in toxic workplace experiences, what I found is a lot of times people bring in their traumas to the workplace, and that's what essentially causes them to act out. Maybe they gravitate towards narcissistic leaders because that's what they grew up with and feel safe around. So if
Yeah.
you look at those deeper layers, it's incredibly refueling. And I say all of this with empathy. There's no judgment here at all.
Yeah. I think on the other hand, how many companies that you've encountered that actually have healthy cultures that are not toxic? People leave for healthy reasons. Have you?
Yes, I have actually. It has been in the minority of my experiences. Actually, I can tell you now. Talk about some serendipity. So I do a lot of consulting, and there's one I'm working with now. It's a remote role, and it's a phenomenal company. So and there in my day work, I do a lot of digital marketing for companies. I also help with leadership strategies as well. And I'm finding in this current role that it is going very well. And what happened is it's a company that's not afraid to get rid of toxic leaders. So you really have to. You really, I know it's easier said than done. I know it's uncomfortable. I know it can make you scared. I get scared. You got to put your foot down and say either you're going to change the behavior or you're gone. And that's what not enough companies do.
The trouble is, some of these so-called toxic employees are like long serving. They started with the owner. It's very difficult. What you're saying is quite true. It can be quite difficult, or family member or friend, all kinds of different things and
Yes.
variations on that theme. So, I think the phrase courage to leave is powerful. What does it and why do so many people struggle to access it when they need it most?
Yeah, so I'll answer that in reverse. So why do
Hmm.
people struggle? I say this with the utmost empathy because they're afraid to speak up. And that's not their fault. That's the fault of not only the company leaders, but really the culture and the structure of the company that essentially makes people feel like if they speak up, they're going to risk their job or their standing or their career. And it's a lot of fear. So, because they don't have psychological safety in the workplace and they don't feel comfortable to share how they really feel and just have this calm conversation, they defer to staying quiet. That's ultimately what happens. One of my big recommendations is to speak up because that's how change begins. It doesn't create the entire shift, but it does begin with that. So what is the courage to leave? Well, it's actually two key things. One, you go into your inner strength and you connect to your core and your true self, and you decide, can I be healthy in this work environment? Is it tolerable? Yes, no workplace is perfect. Yes, there's always going to be challenges and difficult people, but you should not be getting abused. I really emphasize that. And when you find the courage in yourself to realize that you're not going to tolerate this behavior, if you speak up, if you've had those conversations and the culture still doesn't change, then it's time to leave. Maybe not on the spot, maybe not right away, but to find another work environment. And then the second pillar of that is that when you speak up, and I have case studies as well that I've shared, you sometimes do change the culture. This is not always doom and gloom. Sometimes it is. There are some real horror stories, but sometimes when you speak up, the courage to leave may not mean leaving the organization. It may mean going to a different team. Maybe you get a different manager, and that all happens from the power of speaking up.
I think in some cases I see that people are afraid to leave because they don't want, if they decide they want to leave the company, they don't want to lose the compensation package that they may have, and that can be a really compelling reason for them, kind of staying and taking it. What would you say to someone like that?
Yes, that's a crucial concern, and I'll say in my own experience, I've skewed to the extreme. I've had times where I walked out on the spot, not to hurt anyone, not to make people feel like I was attacking them, but to protect myself. But I understand most people have to provide for themselves, their family. You have other financial obligations. So the book walks through strategies, and I talk about this as well in my speeches to make it as practical as possible. It may not mean leaving on the spot. And here's what I've done, and I can feel the energy as I say this. So I really hope this will connect with the wonderful listeners today. That's where you become a bulldozer. My friend calls me Jeff the bulldozer, and you say to yourself, I'm going to apply to a number of jobs on Indeed each day. Maybe it's not 100, but I'm going to apply to 10 new jobs on Indeed a day. I'm gonna go network and meet people. I'm just gonna walk into. I met a guy just a few days ago at a networking event, and he said how he got a client. He just walked in unannounced into a company lobby, talked to the secretary, got the contact info of a leader, and now he has a client. You,
Oh,
you've
wow.
got to be bold. You've got to find that inner strength inside you and say, okay, I can't leave right now, but how do I find my next paycheck? And
Mhm.
You're only as free as your well-developed options, and you're only as free as your willingness to leave an environment. And what I would say then is keep the paycheck, tough it out, and in your free time, evenings, weekends, you grab that coffee and you apply like crazy. It has worked for me like a charm. Don't give up if you get rejected. I promise you'll find something better.
Mm. In your book, you describe the invisible psychological toll of toxic environments. And my question is, what are some of the effects people don't often recognize until they are already deeply impacted?
One huge effect is the effect on their body. There's
Hmm.
also the effect on the mind as well. So what happens is because people are in survival mode, I've been in this mode for many years in my own working career, so I do understand this, that they don't have time always to slow down and understand what's happening to their body. Before I went into a burnout in 2020, I used to drink energy drinks like crazy. I'll still sometimes have the occasional energy drink, not the best, but what I say this because people don't slow down enough to realize, oh, wow, my actual body is hurting. You might have a little bit of shakiness or tingliness. It might be an energy issue. It could be, I've talked to people who had actual symptoms. Their body was actually breaking down. So that's the body. And then the second part would be the mind. That's number two. And what happens is that people get a lot of anxiety. Sometimes it can go from anxiety to depression or even worse. And I'll say this, and being very open, I've also talked to some people who were getting so severely bullied in the workplace they considered taking their own lives, which is incredibly sad to hear. I did everything I could to help them, of course, and the realization here is, the Center for Suicide Prevention showed in their research that more than half of those affected by workplace bullying have suicidal tendencies. So it destroys both our body and our minds.
You very clearly described some intrinsic signals. What about extrinsic ones that, some signs that you are in a toxic environment and, maybe you need to think about your career here.
Yes, well, one thing in trusting your intuition is you may get this weird feeling around certain people. And when I'm preaching out there in the world through all my books and speeches and travels, be vulnerable and be open. It comes with a nuance. I'm not telling people to just bare your soul to your coworkers. I've opened up to the wrong people before. So one sign you can feel internally is like you get this unsafe feeling around someone. Listen to your body. Listen to how you feel. And do you feel like something is off here, or like you're open and it's not heard or understood or respected or valued, or it's always about them and their needs but never about you. So in these toxic work cultures, there's a lack of psychological safety. You can speak up and still not be heard or received, and it's
Mhm.
pervasive. It's pervasive. Sometimes you look, every company may have a bad egg, unfortunately, but in these toxic work cultures, especially some of the cultures I work for in both New York and the Netherlands, the
Mhm.
entire workplace is just filled with toxic people, which is just an awful reality. And that's where you have to say, look, I'm not going to change this work culture. I need to get out of here for my own well-being.
I think I've encountered toxic workplaces that on the surface, they seemed like everyone's happy, everybody's friendly with each other, like they have collaborative work relationships. Um, they're laughing and on the surface, there doesn't seem to be an issue with communication. But really, that's just a cover up because everyone is in, hyper survival mode and they're performing. It's all performative. Um, what are some of the subtle tells? Because when you see that, you can't always tell that it's actually toxic. In fact, you have like leaders that say, "Oh, my team, they love each other, they love me, blah, blah, blah." And that's not actually what's happening. That's what they think. So, what are some of the tells that someone can, kind of pick up on that would point to, this is just a big cover up?
You hit the nail on the head. This is an excellent question. And I'm going to go deep into my personal experience here. So I mentioned I was dealing with a corrupt company, and the company I worked before that corrupt company was actually even more toxic pervasively. And I'll be bold enough to say the name. It's called HelloPrint in Rotterdam, Netherlands. I do mention HelloPrint by name in the book. And by the
Okay.
way, it has a happy ending. I did collaborate with the CEO to help transform the culture. So
Yeah.
the
Then you can
CEO
do
is there, is aware that I spread this message globally. So don't worry.
it. Not
Everything is
about the panic.
yeah, exactly. So one huge red flag that I missed at HelloPrint, by the way, I eventually spoke up about this and it got better. The lack of work-life balance. And what they did is they glorified it in a way where they're like, oh, Jeff, your career is going to improve because all of us have this whole culture of freedom and responsibility. And they hid it performatively behind this idea of freedom and responsibility. And in fact, it was not free at all. You were expected to just work endlessly. They had this
Responsibility
rule.
only.
Yeah, you have the and then I told my manager, "What about the freedom I was sold?" And he's like, "Well, you're responsible for this." And I said, "But I'm doing three jobs in one. I can't work, you know."
Right?
Yvette, I would work till 7 o'clock at night. I'd be the first one to leave the floor. It was completely absurd. It was completely bizarre. It's actually incredibly liberating to speak about this openly. And it was pitched to me in this way that it's a career opportunity. Be careful of that word.
Right.
Work hard, play hard, and this whole thing about, oh, you're gonna help inspire our culture. And it was a lot of BS. And I just found that I was actually getting judged by my coworkers. I'm not kidding. I was getting judged by my coworkers to leave the work floor probably at 6 or 7 at night, which to me was completely ridiculous. So lack of work-life balance, that's a huge red flag. And I really encourage people to investigate the company beforehand, talk to employees who have worked there, and do your due diligence.
Yeah, you're describing a lot of narratives that have double meaning that it's very difficult to see. Back to the original question on the surface, because they're all saying all the right things, you know.
Yeah.
Very interesting. I think this is a good place to take a break. So, this is Yvette Bethel, your host, and we'll be right back after this message.
Organizational Soul is turning 20. Over the past 2 decades, we've helped leaders strengthen their HR, culture, and OD strategies. As we have evolved, we've been working with leaders who go beyond traditional HR and OD, perceiving their organizations as living systems and valuing trusted connections. If the usual tools haven't delivered, we can help you explore new ways of organizing people, culture, power, and vision through an ecosystem lens. Learn more about our newest program, the Living Systems Council, at orgsoul.com.
So, welcome back to Evolve. Our guest for this episode is author, speaker, and podcast host, Jeff Davis. Jeff, we just had like a great conversation before the break. Let's keep it going. I'm excited to hear what you have to say about these questions. You mentioned manipulative leadership in the book. What are some of the most common tactics leaders use that can slowly normalize dysfunction?
Gaslighting. Gaslighting is a big key that comes to mind. If you're not familiar with the term, what that means is that the person, sometimes they could be narcissistic, or in other cases they're just very dysfunctional and a bad leader, and they'll actually deny your experience. So you'll get shamed or put down or criticized for speaking up about how you feel, and even if you do it respectfully, they're like, that didn't happen. And you're like, you can say, well, in my experience that was an unsafe conversation, or what you said impacted us in that way. And these manipulative leaders will actually deny it. I mentioned some toxic workplace experiences. I had people who blatantly lied. I actually once made a mistake where I swore at a colleague. I shouldn't have done it. But what happens was that he criticized me for things that weren't true. And he said, Jeff, you're not authentic. And I pride myself on being very genuine and transparent. And
Right.
he kept kind of building up and criticizing me. And I said to him, I said, Robert, respectfully, we spent weeks working on this presentation. I've bent over backwards to help you. And he said, well, I went to your boss and told him that you're a bad employee. And then I won't say the word. I proceeded to swear at him. He went around the company and he told everybody that he was only being a helpful colleague and that I swore out at him out of nowhere. So everyone missed the context because they lied. So that's a huge manipulative
Right.
behavior of these toxic leaders. They will blatantly lie and deny the truth. And that's why it's important to document as much as you possibly can.
Yeah. That takes me back. Um, if someone's struggling, they're contemplating whether or not to stay or leave. What are some of the internal questions they should ask to help them clarify? Because you don't want to run away from situations that you'll encounter elsewhere. So what would make them, which questions could help them to understand if this is the right move at this time?
Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, I'm mentoring executives on this so I can provide some insights into questions that they can ask themselves. And first of all, can you tolerate it in a healthy way? I'm not saying you're going to eliminate all the bad stuff, but you have to level set with yourself, and you do this in reflection, meditation, talking to friends, go for a long walk. It could be seeking other resources that can help you, and see like, can I tolerate this and still have a balance? If it's toxic and you don't want to leave, that's okay. Can you shut your laptop at 5 or 5:30 or maybe 6 o'clock at the latest and say, I'm going to leave it at work and go home? Some people can do that. I've talked to some people who can just compartmentalize it and they can go home. I've also talked to other people, and I'll be vulnerable. I'm one of those people who am not able to compartmentalize it. If it's toxic at work, I have a hard time shutting it off. So can you tolerate it? Acknowledge, okay, this is a toxic situation. I would also explore, is there anyone there that you can reach out to? Maybe your whole team is toxic, but the whole company isn't. I've been in companies where my team was toxic, but the company as a whole was not bad. Can you reach out to uh, I hesitate to say HR because HR isn't always trustworthy, but can you reach out to a colleague that might be willing to hear you, or someone in the leadership team that you trust, or maybe someone by the water cooler, or maybe someone you can grab lunch with? I'm not saying you have to bare your entire soul to them, but see if you can learn some tips and tactics that you might be able to make a change in that workplace, to speak up, to go to a different team. So ask yourself, have you decided if you can tolerate it or not? Have you spoken up? Have you gone for those conversations? And then you can really make a decision. I can't take this anymore. I'm going to apply everywhere and find another job, or you decide to stay.
You know, you mentioned HR at least twice, maybe three times in this conversation, and it was linked to toxicity. And, a lot of people trust HR. And I'd like you to dive a bit more deeply into that because in some organizations, it may not be that HR is trusted. Tell us more about how HR may, not always, but sometimes contribute to toxic environments and what to look for in those circumstances.
Yes, I'll say that more often than not, they're contributing to the toxic work environments. And the HR professionals often don't have the training. They don't have themselves the leadership ability to be able to navigate these situations. And I'll also share a mindset shift. Understand that human resources is actually a misnomer. It's really company resources. It's really, they're trained to protect the company and the company's interests before you. And I used to be naive and I thought, oh, I can go to HR. And a lot of the times you can't. Now, I mentioned my current gig is a breath of fresh air. I'm working for a great global company here, and here HR is good. I'll say that that's the exception. It's not the norm. And that's based on the hundreds upon thousands of conversations I've had about this. So just realize that up front, they're wired to not help you. You can still speak up though. Sometimes you have to tell HR about that abusive colleague, report it. And that actually can be a good signal. Are they valuing you, or Or are they being dysfunctional? If they're dysfunctional, well, that's another data point. I need to get out of this company. Sometimes they will help though, but you've really got to read the situation right, and that's why I recommend talk to colleagues, make a work buddy, make a work best friend, and try to understand the lay of the land, the politics, and how things work, so you can really see what's the truth of what's happening with the company and with HR.
That's very useful advice because I think a lot of people assume that HR is there for them. And in some cases, depending on the person and who they are and what they value, they may be. But really, they answer to the company, and the company develops their objectives and goals. And so, that's who measures them. And as you know, what gets measured gets done. And and so, thereby indicating who has their allegiance. But anyway, I
Yes.
digress. Uh, Once someone decides they're in a toxic environment and they decide to leave, now they may be affected by it, and some people are not. They may leave confidently. But for the ones that leave and they may have been traumatized by it, what are some practical ways they can begin rebuilding confidence?
Yes, this is a really important one. So, one possibility to consider, this has helped me and many I've spoken to, is talk to a therapist. It can really help you unravel those deeper root causes within yourself and things that might be activating your own trauma. I know that that's a process and a journey. I've gone on this journey. I saw a psychotherapist for 2 years while I was in the Netherlands, and that helped me to uncover the abuse that I experienced growing up that actually was getting triggered by these toxic workplaces. If you happen to not be ready to talk to a therapist or you just don't want to, okay, that's your choice. That's okay. Always follow your intuition, by the way. So I mean that in a good way. You can also seek mentors. You can seek coaches. You could even seek advice from friends, family, if your family is functional, or even doing helplines and resources. There are resources out there. I promise you. And yeah, that's very helpful. I'll just add in this here very quickly. Take out a pen, take a piece of paper, and write down qualities that you admire and like it yourself. And we go on this journey of life, and it's so easy to forget all the wonderful things we've achieved, overcome, good things about ourselves, and write it down and validate yourself. And there's some real empowerment and inner strength there when you remind yourself, these are my good qualities, and remember some good experiences. Your last experience or your current experience might be absolutely terrible, and I acknowledge that. Think of good moments you've had, and if you have no good moments in the workplace, think of other good experiences you've had as well. This is not about being toxically positive. I'm not a fan of that. This is about acknowledging the bad, healing through the bad, and talking through it while at the same time understanding truly you're a valuable person, you're worthwhile, and you have lots of great qualities that will benefit others in the world.
You know, I know you have a collection of stories of, how people kind of rebuilt their confidence. What's one that stands out for you?
Yes, there's one that stands out to me. My dear friend Rachel Radway, she was severely sexually harassed working at Boeing, and that behavior is completely unacceptable. And I really admire and applaud Rachel for speaking up about this. And she shares her story in the book about the absurd amount of toxicity and dysfunction at Boeing. And Rachel had to rebuild herself after that experience because she lost confidence. And she goes about how she tapped into a quantum mindset where she had to make a quantum leap out of all of this madness and insanity. And she had to think of what are new possibilities, and she had to get around different people. And similar to me, she had loads of toxic workplace experiences, so that was not easy. That another one was layered on top of it. But she started to kind of rebuild when she reconnected with her own core, when she stepped outside into other possibilities. She started talking to different people, networking more, and eventually she started building her own business as well. That's not always the answer. I'm not saying everyone has to become an entrepreneur. All I'm saying is just explore different possibilities so you can get out of that situation that you're in.
Hmm. As a last question, let's zoom out a bit. In our anyway. When you think about someone who's listening to this conversation and they feel stuck right now, um, what do you hope that they carry? What's one thing that you hope that they would carry from this conversation with them? What two?
Yes. I acknowledge that you're stuck. I sincerely mean that you're not alone. So remember, you're not alone. It may feel like it. There are so many countless people around the world who feel exactly like you do. And part two is you have options. You have other work possibilities once you start looking. You can talk to better people. I know there are a lot of tough people in this world. I know that there are also a lot of good people in this world as well. So please take away from this conversation, you're not alone and there's hope because you have options.
What about someone who may, they may have worked at the corporation for a very long time and they don't have a degree, but they've progressed and they feel like, if they were to go to another organization without that academic, qualification, they may not be able to, access the same level that they're at. What would you say to them to help them to make that decision?
Yes, while degrees can be helpful, what I've seen in my experience and talking to others, that work experience can be and often is just as powerful. Don't downplay yourself. Don't devalue yourself. You may not have the degree, excuse me. You may not have the degree, but you have experience other people don't. You have insights and other things from your own experiences. So you are just as smart as them, as people with degrees. Don't be in any way intimidated because you have to realize you have just as much value to add. So apply and you shine by talking about all the great work experience that you've had by working at that corporation.
Oh, this has been just a great conversation. And with that, I'd like to thank you, Jeff, for joining us for this episode of Evolve. And because knowing, when it's time to move on from a toxic environment is a valuable skill. And I think based on what you were saying, it's a necessary skill. So before we sign off, please tell our listeners how they can connect with you. And you did say that you have a free gift, if I'm not mistaken. So
Yes.
go ahead and share.
Absolutely. Yvette, it's been an absolute pleasure to speak with you today. It's an honor to talk about this topic. So thank you for having me on. You can connect with me. You can go to my website, jeffdspeaks.com. I've got a blog on there. So jeffdspeaks.com/blog. I have a YouTube channel, Jeff Davis Author. I'm on LinkedIn as Speaker Jeff Davis. And there are a lot of Jeff Davises. So if you just type in Jeff Davis, Courage to Leave, I'll pop up. I also have a free offer for everyone who has listened to this today, and I'd like to give you the PDF of my recently published book, The Courage to Leave: Breaking Free from Toxic Workplaces, for free if you email my assistant. So please email my assistant, Meg, and tell them that you heard the episode today. And her email is meg@jeffdspeaks.com. That's MEG at JEFFD speaks plural.com. Email her and she'll be sure to send you a free PDF copy of the bestseller, The Courage to Leave.
A wonderful gift. Thank you so much, Jeff. This has been Yvette Bethel along with Jeff Davis, and we'd like to thank you for joining us at Evolve.
Thank you for listening to Evolve, Reinventing Leadership, Building Freedom Cultures. Learn more about our proprietary trust, leadership, and culture courses and certifications at the IFB Academy. You can check them out at organizationalsoul.learnworlds.com.